Well, hello, and welcome to another episode of Thrive Like a Parent podcast. Today, I have a very, very special guest, and I say that every now and then, but this one is like very, very special guest. Today, we have for the first time one of I'm going to still call you a client, Lindsay, because you still have sessions left. I always say once a client, always a client. But today we have Lindsay Braunstein, who I have worked with for, over a year and just been involved in your life. Not only have I worked with you, but I've worked with your husband. I thought it would be so special for everyone to hear a little bit about what it's like on a journey of working with myself or the team, right? And because it's very hard to explain, like, what do you mean you're going to teach me how to sensory and emotionally regulate my nervous system? Like, what does that even mean, right? So first and foremost, I would love for you to tell everyone a little bit about yourself and also share a little bit about, if you could, kind of where you were in life when you and I connected.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. So I'm a mom of four. So I have a 16, 14, 9, and 5-year-old. So very, very busy. And I stay home. Previously, prior to my 9-year-old, I actually worked for my younger kids and I worked throughout their whole entire childhood and then started staying home. And I currently had been working with Brooke. So it was kind of a interesting approach. So my husband had actually reached out to Brooke probably 2 years ago, maybe now it's been. My husband is an entrepreneur, very, very busy. Someone else on your
Yeah.
team, and he canceled the meeting
Yeah. He was
quickly
like,
and was
no,
like,
you don't
nope,
understand. Brooke or
nope.
bust. Yep.
Yeah, like it's you or nothing. And so I remember when he started that journey and I didn't know anything about Brooke, had never met, never even really even, I don't even think I followed you at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was great because again, my husband is he's very busy. It does not slow down, very go, 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 relentless, nonstop, which is great. But he was experiencing some burnout and he had found Brooke. And so during that time, he had been seeing Brooke probably for like 3 months, I would say at that point. And it was a different approach. Like I thought when he had talked to me about Brooke, the concept of like we had done therapy before, we had done independent and couples therapy, and it was a totally different approach. When he would share with me about his sessions, it was just different than like your typical couples therapy or your independent therapy. And so as it progressed, at that point in our marriage, we were going through kind of a rough time. Michael and I have been married now 9 years. And I have my older boys, my 16 and 14-year-old, are from a previous marriage. So when we met, obviously he kind of became a parent pretty quickly, or a step parent. And then we had my 9-year-old and my 5-year-old came along. So my youngest has experienced a ton of health issues, and we've been on this journey for the last 5 years. And obviously my 5-year-old was born during COVID and everything was shut down. And then we went straight into all these health issues. And for the last 5 years, it has been literally one thing after another. And so clearly with that and being a parent, your marriage suffers, and our own personal health and our own personal mental well-being suffered as well. And so it was just the perfect storm. So how Brooke and I met was in December of 23. December, January, like right there.
Yeah. Somewhere in there.
Our marriage was at a point where it was pretty much ready to be over. And my husband travels here and there for work. And this one particular trip that he had been taking was, it was like a 10-day trip. He had, been a little bit of, he had decided he was going to like have some fun at the end of it and take a trip from his work trip to like a friend's trip. And it was a lot. We had a ton going on. And to be honest, we were both at a point of burnout. And looking back, where I was then, I was in shambles. So I guess that's really the only way to put it. And I had told him on his trip that our marriage was over and I can't do this anymore. I had shared with his family along with my family that was it. I think at that point, obviously it wasn't that trip, but it was our collective several years. This was building up. We obviously had gone through so much, and I just knew where I was then. I couldn't do it anymore. Like I couldn't do that. I couldn't do our marriage. I couldn't, me personally, my health, like my well-being wasn't great. And so the only thing I knew was that I had to end that. And so at that point, Michael had been seeing Brooke for a few months, and he came home from his trip and he begged me to talk to Brooke, just talk to her one time. Because in that 3 months, Michael had developed a relationship with her that he felt like she got him, like that she understood, that she, knew how his brain worked. Because Michael is he's very his brain functions at a very high fast pace, and as he works through things, he has a harder time recognizing um, how someone else might be feeling, or how maybe it impacts me or the kids, or whatever. And so he begged me, please, please just talk to Brooke. And to be quite honest, I was like, absolutely not. I was like, no, I'm not talking to Brooke. I had made up my mind, and I said, you're Brooke's client. And I remember telling him this, like, you're Brooke's client, like, you belong to her. Like, she's not going to understand. She's not going to get it. Um, and I wholeheartedly believed that.
Yeah.
And I was at a place where I was so broken. And I believe Michael was in a place as well where he was struggling. And to come together and try to repair that as one was just, it wasn't going to work. So a few days went on, and he begged, begged, begged. And I was like, fine, I will do it.
And I was like, yes.
One time I was like, I'll talk to her. He's like, you just set up one appointment. I was like, oh God. And I remember sitting at the table that morning being like, oh gosh, here we go again. Here we go again. And because we had done your typical like couples therapy for several years, which was great. Looking back, like that was definitely, I'm not knocking it. It was definitely great. It helped us grow as a couple. It helped us grow individually. But I always felt like something was missing. Like we would walk into these sessions, and it would be really hard for either one of us. It was so emotionally charged, right? Like you're in this room with this person, and it was so emotionally charged. Like you had so much that you wanted to share with the other, but you didn't know how, and B, that other person was just ready to do the same and defend. And I remember our therapist always said, like, I always had a fire hose at Michael. And I did. I totally did. But there was so much that I wanted him to understand, that I wanted him to hear, that I wanted him to like feel that in that hour, that 50 minutes that we had with that therapist, it was just never enough. And then we left, and life had to go back to normal, right? And I didn't know what to do with those feelings when I left that office, and neither did he. And so when I sat down that morning to meet with Brooke, I was like, oh God, here we go again. Like she's not going to understand. She's not going to get it. She's going to tell me, and Michael's this, and then we're going to go back and forth. And I'm like, she's not going to get what I've endured for the last 9 years of our marriage. I had my mindset that it was just not it. And so I remember
you were ready. You had worked really hard to get to the place where you were at, of like, this has taken me a long time to get to where I'm at.
Right. And I'll be, really honest. I come to this marriage with plenty of my own insecurities, my own past, my own personal issues that prevented me from communicating with Michael effectively, or even understanding my own self. And I think if I say one of the biggest takeaways from this past year really wasn't about Michael and I, like it really wasn't. And I think that my biggest takeaway is that in this past year, I've grown more personally than I think our marriage has grown in sense. Like I personally have grown, and I've learned more about myself individually than I think it was ever our marriage, if that makes sense. And so after that first meeting, I was nervous, heightened. I mean, we were in turmoil, right? And so I remember talking with you, and it was like, there was just something, it was just different. And I remember sitting there thinking, this feels different. Like this, like I was wrong. Like this felt different. And what really inspired me and really actually like hooked me was the fact that like talking to you, something, and I can't remember what you said, but it was like, with this work, you're going to grow. this isn't about Michael. This isn't about your marriage, like you guys as a unit. Like, this is about you. And this is no matter what, like Michael's going to be in your life, right? We have two kids, and obviously the boys still would be involved in his life. And co-parenting, obviously I've done that. It was the moment I was like, well, yeah, you're right. Like, I'm still going to have to communicate with Michael. It's not like if I leave and we end our marriage, like we're still having to be somewhat of a unit. And you shared with me like the growth that's going to happen with you and learning about you, either way, divorce or not, is going to be something that you will have for a lifetime. That really hit home because I know I come to this with my own past and my own opportunities. And so then we started on our journey. And it was kind of, I'll be honest, like when Michael's like, okay, so you set up an account with Boxer, I was like, I'd never heard of Boxer. And I'm like, so I'm supposed to go sit in my closet and walkie talkie this person that lives so far away that I've never met before. And I'm supposed to basically like run to mom or run to dad
Yeah,
and be like, mom, guess what Michael did?
totally.
Mom. And that was so uncomfortable, so uncomfortable. And I remember you saying like, it's fine. It'll get easier. It will be. And you were right. It did get easier. And it was honestly, I still now, even not talking to you frequently, I have the app on my phone and I run across it and it's literally like a natural, like, it's like when you text your best friend, like you may like have nothing to really even text, but it's like a natural, like, oh, I should, Vox or Brooke and so it did become a lot easier. But at first I was like, oh my gosh, what is this? What in the world? But I can say wholeheartedly, it has been the biggest, the most growth I've ever had in my whole entire life within this year.
I'm glad. I'm so glad. That's the whole point. I remember our call, and you are correct. That's what I remember from it most too. Of it's my biggest belief that everyone should like understand their brain and their body. And I do think that old school traditional, I don't want to say old school because like therapy is still right, like not old school, but regular traditional therapy is just talk therapy. And if you don't understand your brain and your body, and you don't understand your partner's brain and body, and you don't understand your children's brain and body, like how are you all going to function as a unit? And if Michael doesn't understand how you function, how is he going to be able to support you? And if you don't understand how Michael functions, how are you going to be able to say, got it, that's his brain? It's not that he's just brushing me off or being, a dick or like whatever it is. Sorry, Michael, if you're listening, you're not a dick, but that's just what came out of my mouth. But you know what I mean? Like there's so much in terms of a dynamic and with a family that if you don't understand how you individually are functioning and the the role in which we play, the role in which the rest of our family plays, and how we can support our own brain and body, it just becomes enmeshed. And the two of you have so much love for one another. It was so enmeshed in terms of a lot of times what I see in individuals is we seek validation, or we don't know where else to get the validation from to fulfill our regulation needs other than externally, other than other people. It doesn't have to be a partner. It can be, one of our kids or a friend or our parents or like whatever it is. But we seek that externally because we don't know any different. We don't know how to listen in. We don't know how to regulate our nervous system. We don't know even how our brain ticks, right? And so often people talk about the nervous system of like, I can help you regulate your nervous system. Well, what does that mean, right? Like, what sensory basis does your brain, like what does your brain map look like in terms of sensory? And how do you function and how do you tick and what is the language of your brain? And so not only navigating that as a but navigating that as an individual, I knew no matter what took place in your life or where your road led you, that this would be so beneficial for you. And it was just as much a pleasure to work with you as I know you enjoyed the journey as well. I would love for you to give some examples, if you can, of like, how we always like collect data, right? So like, can you give some examples of markers or anything you can remember of like, this is how I was functioning when I first started this work?
Yes. So I think, gosh, if I look back and I rewind the clock a little bit more about me. So I am naturally a people pleaser. I am naturally a nurturer. I'm naturally somebody that is very empathetic. And I find myself in situations where, regardless on, my own needs, what was happening is that I was so engulfed in our unit and our family, that I was long gone as far as my own needs and my own body, really not even knowing what I truly felt. And I remember in the very beginning coming to you with these little things, like little conversations where I'm like, "Oh my god, Michael said this, like this really hurts, or this hurt my feelings." And looking back, I mean, the codependency amongst Michael and I was really strong. I mean, I stay home, and Michael is extremely successful and a very busy entrepreneur. And I was yearning so much for a connection with him
Mhm.
as my husband. And it was so hard. It was like I was pushing myself to the max, trying to do the things, trying to be the perfect wife, trying to be the perfect mom, trying to make sure everybody was taken care of, make sure all the beds were made, make sure the laundry was done. I mean, to the point of my own basically fall, and thinking that that was going to draw Michael closer, right? Because if I was doing all the things, then I would be, in a sense, earning his
Yeah, rewarded.
appreciation, or yeah. And there were so many days where I would, you know, be lost in my own mind, and like not not have any idea. Like I was spiraling out of control, to the point where any little conversation we would have, or any or lack thereof, I mean, it was just a never ending cycle, trying to seek that outside like approval, or that receive that outside love from my husband. And he, on the other hand, was engulfed in his world of work. And that's where his brain always is in work and business. And I felt like that was, a direct reflection of me. Like if he always wants to be at work, or he's always working and like his phone, and it was like, then I'm not enough, that I wasn't doing enough, or that I wasn't, and then there became resentment, right? Because that was a really strong situation that we discovered, is like I was very resentful because he didn't understand. He didn't understand all the things that I did at home, and I didn't understand all the things he did at work. And it was just a vicious cycle. So at that time, I was burnt out. I was hurting. I was in a place where I would sit and imagine my life somewhere else.
Yeah.
And so, whatever that was, like I would sit on my phone in the dark room after I had finally got the kids to bed, and I would look for houses, because I was envisioning a life where I didn't have to feel that way anymore.
Mhm.
And I would scroll through Zillow, or scroll through like John L. Scott, or whatever it is, and I would look, and then I would picture myself and my kids in this house, and without Michael, without Michael in that picture.
Mhm.
And I thought that if I could remove myself from the environment that I was in, that would solve my problem. That would fill that hole inside of me that had been there for a really long time. And at the time it was really hard, because obviously having 4 kids and being a stay-at-home mom, I was like, how the heck am I going to do that? Like, what am I going to do? But I felt like I had no other way. Like I had to do this. And I would sit and I would cry and I would write, and I would feel terrible that I was doing all of those things, because here I am still married, and I knew that that's a hurtful thing, right? Like I'm sure Michael wouldn't want me to be doing that. And I just never felt like I could continue. Like I could continue on the journey we were on. And so during that very beginning of us working together, I mean, there were countless days where I would message you and I would cry, and I would get it out. And I will say that that was something that I didn't realize how much, looking back, like how much of a difference that made, was actually releasing it from my body.
Yep.
And when I say releasing, like physically saying it out loud.
Yep.
And it's one thing to talk to your friends or your trusted family or whatever, whoever you're talking to, which I have good, dear friends. And I'm not somebody that wants to put my marriage out into my friend group and all that. Not that I hide it, but it was never beneficial, right?
Yeah.
And so I really just always was, for the most part, keeping these things inside. So in our first bit of our journey, as uncomfortable as it was kind of messaging this walkie-talkie system, I remember very quickly realizing like how much that made a difference, right? Because I couldn't talk to Michael about these things. A, I didn't
Mhm.
know how, and B, he wasn't listening, and it was just chaos, right? When we did try to have a conversation. So I would withhold all these things and it would just manifest within my body,
Yep.
and it would eat me alive, and I would go to bed thinking about it, and I would wake up thinking about it, and then throughout my day I would be thinking about it. And I remember in the first, gosh, I would say even the first few weeks of us working together and using the system, once I finally got a little bit more comfortable, physically feeling a difference like in my body. And at the time I had no idea. Now looking back, I can recognize what that is, but in the very beginning, it did make a difference, like getting, and also too, it was really helpful for me to say it out loud, because I also several times listened to my own messages back, and I would listen to myself and what I was saying, and I would almost as like an audience. And I remember thinking to myself, like, like if I were my own mother, or if I was my own friend, like, what would I say to you? And then I started thinking that way. And then you and I would go back and forth. And all of a sudden, I realized like what I was feeling in those moments. It was a big thing. I mean, there were millions of things, but I knew that someone was listening, somebody heard me, and what I felt was real.
Yep.
And I think that that's another thing. Like when I say I've grown over the last year, I think trusting my own self has been
Yes.
a substantial
Yes.
change. Um, I think that's been a huge piece of my journey, is really, really believing what I feel is real.
Yep.
And I come from my, my whole life, I've never really believed what I feel is real. And I've never honored my own feelings, right? Like I don't trust that my feelings are valid, or I don't trust that they're worthy, or whatever it may be. And now for the first time in my life at 41, I can say what I feel is real,
Yes. Yeah.
100%, regardless if it feels real to you or if
Yeah.
that's the way
If it's
you see it.
rational, it
Like,
still matters.
totally. It still
Yep.
matters. And it's still what I'm experiencing. Whatever you're experiencing, that's you. But what
Yeah.
I'm experiencing is this. And for the first time in 41 years, I can say I wholeheartedly trust myself.
I love
And I
that.
think that's one of the, bigger pieces of growth, is I was so far from trusting anything. The only thing I knew a year and a half ago when we started was that I was a good mom. That's the only thing I knew.
You're an incredible mom. An
And that was the
incredible
only
mom.
thing I believed. And that was the only piece of my world that I was holding on to,
Yes.
because I knew that I was a good mom. And I knew that what I was doing in my day to day, like I could trust that.
Yeah.
But outside of that, I trusted nothing else.
So, okay. When I first met you, you 1,000% were putting everyone above yourself. And I usually have markers that I can remember and hold on to for my clients, because then when we do a shift or we make a shift or there's something different from where that marker is, it's like, hey, we need to recognize this and notice that we've like shifted the pattern. One of the very, very random, excuse me, but markers for you was like, I need to go to 2 grocery stores, but I don't want to upset Michael because I know he's had a long day at work. And so I will skip the second grocery store, even though I know we need XYZ for dinner tonight, or because we needed the gluten free, pasta or whatever it was. And you lived almost on eggshells of like trying to maneuver around, trying to keep everyone happy, including Michael. But that means that you were managing everyone else's nervous system. You were trying to regulate for everyone else their nervous system. And the piece of you saying, like, it's uncomfortable to say these things out loud, it is in the beginning, because what happens, and the cycle that you and Michael were in, was you would hold on to it and hold on to it and swallow it and swallow it. Because a lot of, I'm just going to say it, like, I believe that, and I see this as a pattern, a lot of women feel like we can't rock the boat, or we want to keep things happy, or we want to not be a nag, or not be too much, or not be the crazy one that always has the emotions. And so we hold on to it, we keep it in. And then eventually we're like, I can't take it anymore. And we blow. And you and Michael were in this cycle of like holding on to it, holding on to it, holding on to it. And then you guys would have this big conversation. And that would lead to like hours long of a conversation, but you would finally get everything out that you've been holding on to for a really long time. And then the reconnection would happen from finally releasing all the things that you all needed to say that you had held on to and that you didn't say. And so it becomes this like strained, like you're saying, like codependent attachment of where it's like, I need to feel that connection. And it feels so good when we finally do come back together and we reconnect. And it almost like brings back, it can almost bring back like the butterfly feelings or like the first romantic feelings of like when you're first dating, because you're so detached and then you're so connected. But what we want is for it to feel connected all the time. It may not feel like butterflies all the time, but we want you to feel connected 1000% of the time. And utilizing voice messaging, the reason you said it's uncomfortable is because you held on to things for so long and you didn't even trust your own intuition or your own voice or your own feelings. And saying it in a safe space without Michael there, right? It was a voice messaging for you and me, right? You and I
Right.
met independently. I met with Michael independently. I never did sessions with all of us together, right? And it allows your brain to get comfortable and get used to saying the thing out loud. And I often have to tell clients, especially in the beginning, like, I don't care if you tell me you're cheating on your spouse. I don't care if you tell me you robbed a bank. Like, I don't really care what you tell me. I am never going to judge. I am never going to say you shouldn't have done that. Maybe I will, because I do call my clients on their shit, but I'm never going to belittle or minimize or shame any of the feelings you're having. And so when you are allowed a space to be able to not just hold it in your head but verbalize it and then get that feedback of like, wow, it's actually okay for me to feel the things that I feel, you are then able to start the trust of yourself, right? You're then able to start knowing that we've built some sort of safety within your life of saying these things. And then what we slowly implemented was, instead of you blowing or both of you blowing up at each other or having these huge, like knockout, drag out like conversations, let's say it like in real time, which is not easy. It's uncomfortable. There's fear of like what the other person will say back, right? Will it be accepted? Will it be all the different things? And so what we did is we created safety within your relationship with the two of you and allowed you both to be able to own your feelings, trust your feelings, verbalize them. And then we also worked on the piece of, just because we feel those feelings doesn't necessarily mean that I have to take on what you just said, right? Like, thank you
Right.
for sharing your feelings. You can have those feelings. It doesn't necessarily mean that I'm responsible for those feelings. I can support those feelings, but I don't need to fix those feelings. And that takes time to shift a dynamic. That takes time to also accept each other for who you are. And
That was huge. I think that
right.
that was a big
Be like,
piece.
okay, got it. This is who my partner is, or this is who I am, right?
Well, I think that when you say it's so funny when you talk about the marker of like going to 2 grocery stores, like I feel that in my body when you say that. Like I vividly remember
Mhm.
that it was so confusing for me because here I am. Our son was diagnosed with celiac 3 years ago now, and we don't have any of that in our family. We had no idea what we were doing, but we knew obviously we had to make a change. And so a lot of the food in which he would eat, I would have to go to Whole Foods or New Seasons versus Fred Meyer. And obviously, feeding a family of 6 is a lot, right? And so I would feel the immense pressure to get all of this stuff done and make sure it's perfect, wrapped in a bow for everybody. And I remember when I would leave my house, I'd be like, okay, I'd look at the clock. And I mean, I'm the sole caretaker of the kids, obviously, being home all the time. And Michael's schedule is pretty flexible and he is home much more than, many parents that work outside of the home. However, I was trying my best to make sure, like you said, he was happy when he was home, right? Because if he's happy, that's on me because the home is my job. And so I felt I had to make the home this perfect place with beautiful ribbon tied on top. And so with that, when I left, our young 3-year-old or 2-year-old at home with him, and he's crying and fussing and, cranky and needs a nap. And here now that's on Michael. I felt guilt.
Yep.
And although I wasn't leaving to go wine tasting with my girlfriends, I was literally going to the grocery store trying to find, the gluten-free option that we needed for him. And I felt immense guilt every time I left the house. And so what that did, and I never understood it. And when I would feel these feelings inside, or, another example we've talked about is when I went and got my hair done. And I rarely, it's not like I'm out socializing a bunch. So like my time was when I got to go to the grocery store, when I got to go get my hair done, which was every 6 weeks. But I would race to that appointment,
Yep.
drive as quickly as I can. And then I would have anxiety when I left getting home. And I would feel so uncomfortable outside of the home. And it's crazy looking back, thinking like, oh my gosh, like,
Yep.
how? Because I was doing something for myself. But at that
Yep.
point, when we started working together, doing something for myself was, in sense, wrong. I felt like it was wrong. And not when I say that, but internally, my body felt like it was wrong. My body wasn't accepting it.
Yep.
And so, therefore, I had these negative feelings when I would leave, and I would sweat coming home. I would literally open the door and I would have to dive right into something, whether it's unloading the dishwasher, making dinner, doing a load of laundry, or whatever it was. I flew through that door and took all responsibility away from Michael at that moment, or what it felt like, so that I would, in sense, be back in my role.
Mhm. Yep. I
And
remember. Go ahead.
it was so looking like, I mean, the fact that I would be sweating driving home, thinking like I've been gone for, 2 hours, and the uncomfortable feeling, like the physical uncomfortable feeling was so unbearable.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine now
Yeah.
thinking I
It's
felt
like
that way.
it's like there's a burning building. It's our fight or flight system. It's our system saying something is wrong and you need to get the hose and put it out, right? I remember when you were like, Brooke, I'm going on a trip with a girlfriend. This is like the first time in however many years I'm actually going on an overnight. I'd really like to go get my nails done after or do something. And it was so wildly uncomfortable for you. And then you went
I'll
home.
never forget that.
Michael had the kids at a play date and you were like, nope, I'm not coming. And he was like, what? And you're like, yep, I'm going home. And then you were like, I feel so uncomfortable right now. You're like, I really need to organize the pantry. And I was like, okay, you have a free house to yourself. Like, are we really going to organize the pantry right now?
Oh my
The
gosh.
pantry won. The pantry won
I
that
remember
time.
messaging you and I said, okay, Brooke, the pantry won. But
Pantry
I
won.
felt bad.
But like that was the beginning of working together. And like,
It was the very beginning. You had actually pushed me. So I had not been out of the house overnight. At that point, it was 7 years, 7 or 8 years,
yeah,
by myself without Michael. So Michael and I had traveled, but I had not gone anywhere like other than a few hours out of the home, away from my kids, and spent the night without Michael in 7 years. And so when we first started working together, I had kind of teased the idea that, oh, maybe I should go. We have a really beautiful wine country spa. It's my favorite place. And I was like, maybe my best friend and I should go do that. And you're like, absolutely, you should do that. Like, you have to do it. And I was like, "Oh, okay." And so I don't even remember. I booked the room and I was in shock, and I immediate regret. Like, oh my God, what did I just do? How am I going to do this? And because in that moment, I had created a world where I felt, and this is on me, I felt that my home couldn't function without me. And that if I were to leave, there would be burden put on Michael, there would be burden put on my kids. And I couldn't do that to them. I physically couldn't, because basically I knew that the only way I felt okay about internally was through them. Like, I couldn't own that on my own. So I ended up going, and I was gone for what, 24 hours, maybe. I don't even know if it was 24 hours. And we had to check out of the hotel at like 1. And I thought, okay, I looked down and my nails, like I wanted to get my nails done, which is 10 minutes from our house.
yep,
And I was sweating the whole time. It was guilt. It was, I knew I was going home and I needed to get food in the fridge. Like I needed to take care of my world because that was my job. And at that time, Michael had gone to a friend's house with the kids and he knew I was coming home. And so he's like, oh, come over, come, hang out at our friend's house. And I told him no. And that was probably one of the very first times that like I recognized that I listened to what I wanted. I didn't want to leave the spa and go hang out with a bunch of screaming kids and eat pizza at a friend's house. I wanted to go home. And I never knew how many times I didn't honor what I wanted. And
Yep.
so I had no idea what that felt like. And
Yep.
I remember Voxering you saying, guess what I just did? I
Yep.
didn't want to go there and I didn't. And as small as that sounds to most and to some, I mean, that was a turning point in
It was.
my work with you because it was the first time that somebody in my life had told me, okay, let's do this, or you should do this. And I thought to myself, like, is that something I really want to even be doing? And I didn't do it. And so I went home and I walked into this cold, dark house. And I am never home alone in my own home ever. And I remember walking in and all the lights were out and it was cold and it didn't even feel like my home because I'm never there without either the kids or Michael.
Yep.
And I literally started to panic because I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to do with
Yep.
myself.
Yep.
I didn't know what to do with my own feelings. And I remember my anxiety started kicking in full force. And I felt so lost in this world. Like, I remember not even turning on the lights in the kitchen because I was like, I truly don't even know what to do. And I looked in this pantry, as many pantries, they could all use some work. And I was like, no, Lindsay, don't do it. And we were Voxering at that time. And I was like, Brooke, the pantry needs it. Like, I got to do something, right? Like, I got to be productive. I have to
You have
go
to do
and
it
work.
right.
I have to
Because
do
it's
it.
so uncomfortable.
It was so uncomfortable. And I remember powering through that pantry.
Yep.
And at the very end, it felt so good. I did get the pantry nice and clean. But that was the moment I sat down and I was like, holy shit. Like, this is real. Like, what we had been talking about, you and I had been starting to work on, it was really starting to kick in, at that point. And I think that was like 2 months in. And I knew at that moment when I sat down at the counter and I realized, like, if I can't even be in my own home by myself
Mhm.
for 10, 20, 30 minutes without panic of trying to do something for someone else, then what am I doing? Like, what am I doing?
Yep.
And fast forward to now, just to put it in perspective, is this past weekend, Sunday, we had nothing going on. And I told Michael, I'm like, I'm not doing anything at all today. So we had just hosted a big 4th of July party and I was hosted out and I was so tired and I just felt like doing nothing. So I told him, I'm like, we're doing nothing today. I was like, I don't care what you're doing. I'm doing nothing. And I sat my butt
Even
down
that, to say
outside.
that is like, right?
I spent 7 hours on Sunday by the pool doing absolutely nothing with dishes in my sink, laundry to be done, floors to be mopped. And you know how big of a deal that
It
is.
is a huge
And
deal.
it is, I cannot tell you, it was a moment where I sat there and I was like, okay, I don't care what anyone else is doing.
Yep.
Michael took the kids to Costco and I was like, okay, great, go to Costco. You need to get out of the house, you go to Costco. I'm not going to Costco. I'm staying right here. And I floated in the pool for a good 2 hours by myself in my backyard with no one around. And it was the absolute best feeling in the world.
I want to share in May. I'm not gonna say the whole thing, but you messaged me in May and you said, "Hi, I just wanted to say thank you with all my heart. You will understand more than anyone when I share this." And it was very similar to what you did this past weekend. You explained to me that there was so much going on and like there was so much to be done. But you said, I'm currently laying by the pool, reading a book and enjoying me. I've never been able to sit still, be present in the moment, and focus on nothing other than what I'm doing in that moment ever. It may not be 100% perfect, and I have lost my place in the book a few times as my mind wanders, but it's a hell of a large improvement, not to mention your son is inside alone, and I don't feel guilt over that either, selfishly, because I feel really damn good right now. And I would love, we're coming to an end on our time. And Lindsay, I'm not going to lie, I feel like we should absolutely do another podcast because I feel like everything you've gone through, thyroid stuff, would be like really, really important for everyone to hear because I especially because I have thyroid things going on. I think everything you went through is so important to talk about. And I think people would be really interested to hear your story. But there was a time through us working together where you had no other choice than to utilize the tools. And you were literally bedridden and you were stuck in bed. And it literally, everything with your thyroid happened overnight. And you had no other choice than to advocate for yourself. You had no other choice than to take care of you. You had no other choice than to utilize the tools that we had worked so hard leading up to that. And it shows now, like, you're still taking care of yourself. But I would love for you to explain before we wrap up, how has this, you being able to take care of yourself, you saying, I don't care what you do, but I'm going to do this for the day. How has that affected your relationship with Michael as a whole within your family life?
Yeah. So I would say, it's the one thing that saved our marriage. I mean, I don't think him and I would be together sitting here today, or we would not be married today if I hadn't gone through the last year and a half working with you. We've both grown in ways individually. And I think that's the biggest piece for me, is that we would have never grown individually in just a traditional couples therapy. And again, I totally love therapy. I am all for it. But truthfully, what we needed was the individual, in the sense of understanding our own selves in order to grow together. And so now I would say, I mean, I can give you an example from last night. Like, again, referencing on the health things, I am still battling a chronic disease that has changed my life in many different ways. And with that, it has also affected my marriage. And so it has played a big role in our marriage, because obviously, having a chronic disease, my husband has to support me, or he's there with me every day. And, last night I was feeling down and sad, and, got some more results and things aren't where they need to be. I turned to him and I shared with him what I'm feeling. And I told him that some of the feelings I know are a little bit irrational, but they're my feelings.
Yeah.
And he turned to me and said, "What do you need?" And I said, "I need you to," and then I listed 5 things that I needed from him. And we laid there and we watched the rest of our show, and we woke up and we were okay. And I cannot tell you, that would have never
No.
in a trillion years happened without this type of support. And
Neither side of it. Neither
ne-
side of it. You sharing your
no,
feelings vulnerably and feeling safe enough to share, as well as Michael actively listening and saying, "What do you need?" As well as Lindsay, you accepting Michael's support. Like, that was part of it
right,
too, of like leaning in and being like,
sure,
because you were taking care of people pleasing, that like there were some times where Michael wasn't showing up, but there were some times where he was like he was, but like
sure,
it's
right,
very hard for us to accept it too and lean in and be
right.
like, okay, someone else can take care of me when we come from the state where you started at.
Right, exactly. And I was never, even prior to Michael, I could not accept help. And
Yeah.
I have survived on my own my whole life. I mean, growing up in an alcoholic family and then being on my own for the most part of my adolescence. I mean, I've never had somebody support me in the sense of supporting my nervous system or supporting my needs. And that in return, now that all I was doing was supporting everyone else, because that was a hole that I was always missing. And so in our marriage, that played a huge role as far as us growing individually and knowing how to support one another, because we finally understood ourselves. I think that was the biggest key. Is I didn't understand myself, and he sure as heck didn't understand himself. And so once we came to a place where we grew and we could understand our own individual needs, that's when the real work started. And it wasn't beautiful the whole time. I
No.
mean, I think another thing that I realized through the journey was that with growth also comes a lot of eye-opening experiences. And so throughout this, I will say, I mean, it was very hard. It wasn't like we just started this therapy and our marriage was just roses and sunshine from there. I think a hard piece of it was facing the reality. And also too, with my own growth and realizing what I need for the very first time, some of those things that I needed, I wasn't finding in Michael. I wasn't finding in my partner. And he wasn't able to give that to me. And I had to do a lot of work with you and individually and like decide, is this something I want to even be doing?
Yeah.
Because our growth was not in sense linear either. And so we both grew at a different pace. We both experienced this process differently, all positive, but just at different levels. And we were able to go through the journey kind of side by side. And so I think that that was a huge piece too. It was like, gosh, is this actually good work? But is this going to really open my eyes that maybe this isn't what I want?
Yeah.
And so, and trusting that what I have found that I need, what do I need personally? What does my body need? What does my mind need? That may not always be what Michael's able to provide.
I feel like we have so much more to talk about, but we have to wrap. But I do think we should do another one on all things thyroid and your journey through that if you're open to it.
Absolutely.
I really appreciate you being so open and honest and sharing your life and being vulnerable. And my hope is that others see themselves in your story and know that not all is lost, and that if we understand ourselves and we take care of ourselves and we support ourselves, there is hope and there is growth. And I couldn't be more proud of both of you. I mean, for both of you to take on this work and really truly want this. You all were a committed couple, even though you were at a low. And I could not be more happy for either one of you. Well, thank you. Well, thank you. Well, until next time, XOXO, Dr. B.